What's up, YouTube faithful, and welcome back to the Princeton Review's SAT Night Live. Once again, my name is Ken Brenner, and this week we're going to be talking about using a tool that you have in your hand during the test, but oftentimes we're only using it to fill out answers in our Scantron sheet, in our bubbles. And of course, that tool is our pencil. And it's funny, right? Because when you're faced with a difficult task, and it's a timed task, you say to yourself, well, I really need to keep moving through the questions, filling the answers in, making progress, so of course I get as many points as possible. And it can feel really inefficient to grab your pencil, make notes and things like that. But in a way, and in several ways actually, I'm hoping to show you guys tonight that your pencil actually goes a long way to making the problem more efficient and not less. And if you kind of think about a difficult subject that you're currently dealing with in high school, maybe you just spent the year trying to work through European history, or maybe you found certain concepts in trigonometry difficult, or there was a book that you were having trouble working through. If you try to go just off of your memory alone, and if you try to do everything in your head, you might not remember crucial details when you need them. And so you're going to have to spend time going back to the text, back to the lecture, back to the textbook, and look these things up all over again. And then just like with the SAT, that actually costs us time. And so for tonight, our central idea is going to be, how does the pencil help us keep the problem moving and actually help us make progress throughout the exam? Our first sample problem tonight comes from the writing and language section. So we have this paragraph, and then question 6, we have our task. Which of the following choices would best complete the distinction described in this sentence and the paragraph as a whole? It's easy when you're in the SAT trenches to treat all of these longer problems as if they were saying the same thing, that they just want something that matches what's going on in the passage. But your question task here really needs to be noticed. And one of the ways I could do that is with my pencil. Which one of the following would best complete the distinction that's described in this sentence and the paragraph as a whole? Now I have something. Now that I've underlined my question task, I can kind of go into the passage and say, I really need to look at the distinction that's occurring in this particular area. So as I read, my second sentence goes on to say, the shift, however, has yet to produce a substantial increase in how women who are nearly as likely to work as men are paid. And so now I start to say, the distinction that I found might be about women and men. In this plea, the father of the family earns the family wage, and now I get to my underline part, and gives the children their last names. And of course, I should go on, but if I continue the passage, it's definitely about men and women and the different gender roles. So now that I've captured my distinction, I can start asking what would best complete it. The father of the family earns the family wage, got you. And so most naturally what should happen here is I should be talking about the mother of the family if I want to complete the distinction. So another area my pencil can work with in writing and language is in the process of elimination. We know that A is wrong, but to make progress through the problem and to feel a sense of completion, I want to physically cross off answer choice A. B, while the mother tends to the children in their home, I like this answer because it's keeping the distinction between man and woman, and in this case, father and mother. What I might do is put a little dash next to this answer to show that I'm keeping it. Though his interest in masculine things like sports may vary, well, his interest is keeping the discussion on the father, right? And so that's not completing my distinction. And then, but we'll only be able to achieve a wage commensurate with his skills and education. Notice how in these wrong answers, I'm really able to put my pencil and my focus on a part that's making them incorrect. This again ties to the father. With all of that in mind, only one of my answers had the distinction between father and mother, man and women, and that's choice B. Before we just move on, take a look at all of the notes I made with my pencil, underlining the question task, finding relevant evidence in my writing and language passage, and eliminating answers based on very specific flaws. I move on from this problem much more sure as to what the right and the wrong answers are here, and it's my pencil that really helps me show that progress. When you get to the math section, you're often given these very long word problems. And because the word problems are long and they take a long time to read, we might say to ourselves, shoot, you know what? I have to just do as much as I can in my head. And my pencil, I almost don't even want to pick it up because I need to spend every last second understanding what's going on. The first place your pencil could really help you is if you jump to the end of the question and underline it. Which of the following describes what the expression x over 5 squared represents? It's almost like before I get wrapped up in the nonsense going on in this equation, I just want to know the end game. What does x over 5 squared represent? And then I have my equation down here at the bottom, and I see that x over 5 squared is part of that equation. So what could be very helpful to me is if I'm able to figure out what other parts of this equation are and to use a topic from the last video we did on process of elimination. I'm going to work through the problem one step at a time. We'll talk more about that in the future and see what notes I can make with my pencil. Two fungal species of Aspergillus flavus, AF36 and AF42, were grown in liquid cultures at a temperature of 37 degrees Celsius and spun at 60 rotations per minute. There's no math to do here, but I might note that there are two fungi and there seem to be two terms on the left-hand side of my equation. The AF36 culture grew at a slower rate than the AF42 culture. So if I can figure out which one of those expressions are slower, I might have my answer. And together the cultures produced in 3 days the amount of fungus required for experiments. Well, if I think that the left-hand side of my equation might be the fungi and then the amount of fungus they produce, my right hand might have something to do with this 3. And I notice that I see my 3 in the right side of my equation, and so I say this 3 likely has to do with the time. That maybe it represents the 3 days it took the fungi to produce the fungus, and maybe it means that they're making about 1/3 of the fungus each day. Then I say to myself, okay, I've said that these two fungi might be AF36 and AF42. Well, before I go any further, I already know that the 3 deals with the time. And that means the term I'm interested in, x over 5 squared, doesn't have to deal with the time. What does that mean? The process of elimination tells me that B and C are out because both of them deal with time. Remember that they were talking about producing a required amount of fungus. And so if I've already figured out where the time is in my equation, now I'm just looking for where the fungus is. So what's the significance of AF36 growing at a slower rate? We'll take a look at these two fractions. Which one will grow more slowly? The right-hand fraction, x over 5 squared, the one we're looking at, has a larger denominator. And if you square a larger denominator, your denominator just gets even bigger. And that means the fraction itself is going to get smaller. And so your fungus will grow at a slower rate. And so now I could say that x over 5 squared represents the fungus that's growing more slowly. And if I go back in, it's AF36 that grows at a slower rate. Therefore, my answer is A. You might not have all of these markings on your problem, but you definitely can get value from underlining your actual question task, which was here, from labeling your expression, and from eliminating the answers, right, that don't work because of a very particular word or phrase. And again, this also gives us the idea that we're making progress through this long, complicated math word problem. This is true of any math problem that's got multiple steps, even if it's not a word problem. When confronted with this incredibly ridiculous multiplication with all of these different terms, trying to keep all of this in your head is asking for a mistake. Instead, alphabetically, the first term I see is A, and these things only have an a to the negative 4 and an a to the 5th. So if I just start my calculations there on paper with a to the negative 4 times a to the 5th, that equals a to the negative 4 plus 5, because remember, We add our exponents when we multiply like bases, and I just get a to the 1 or a. Now, if I had answer choices here, any answers that don't have a to the first in them, or just a, they're just gone. And who knows, maybe one or two of my answers gets crossed out right now off that first step. What comes next? B. So there's b to the negative 1. Later on, there's b cubed. And later on, there's b to the negative 1. So once again, when I multiply like bases, I add, and this just becomes b to the first or b. And now any answer choice that I go for, that I see, that doesn't have b in it is gone. You might see where this is heading. Last one we'll do here is we have c to the 6 and c to the negative 5. Oh, wow. C to the 6 times c to the negative 5. Yeah, that equals c to the 1 or c. At this point, I've probably done enough work where if I had answer choices, I'd have eliminated all three of them. But notice how the problem looks way more complicated in the beginning than it winds up being at the end. But that only comes if you work one step at a time using your pencil and clearly doing the steps on paper. Trying to combine this in your head opens up the doorway for a mistake. And what a shame to lose this point on a problem that actually didn't turn out so badly. But maybe the number one section on this test, and where we'll spend most of the remainder of our time tonight, where your pencil really matters, is the reading section. And maybe your brain just did a double take. Yeah, Princeton Review is telling you that on the reading section, the more you write, the better you do. What? Well, let's go ahead and see just the options we have to use our pencil and keep it moving on this section. Number 2, as it is used in line 6, rank most nearly means. The first thing you might do is you might want to say, wait a second, what's the question really asking me? What does rank mean? That could go in your head, but maybe if the question was really complicated, you could even start by just writing down what the question's really looking for. But really where the value is it wants me to go to line 6. And so the first thing I'm going to do is with my pencil, I'm going to bracket off the sentence that line 6 is a part of, from line 4 to line 7. To really stay organized, I'm going to note that this is for question 2. What I'm trying to do here is focus on the part of the passage that I really need, and I'm keeping track of what parts of the passage I've read. Then I'm going to read my sentence, but as I read, I'm really looking to come up with a good definition for the word rank. They liked the Beatles and thought Elvis Presley was out, and we thought the Beatles were rank and that Elvis was tough. But that seemed the only difference to me. You might remember this story from The Outsiders in your high school classes. The next thing I can do with my pencil is I can cross off the word rank. What I'm really looking to do is come up with what rank means. And I can use the context of the sentence to put that together. They liked the Beatles and thought Elvis Presley was out. So this group that's being discussed here, the Socias, like the Beatles. They're a fan of the Beatles and they don't like Elvis Presley. And then notice that the other half of the sentence is what we, the narrators group, not the Socias, thought. We thought something about the Beatles and we thought that Elvis was tough. How do I know for sure the groups don't agree? That seemed the only difference to me. And of course, we also have the word but. We now know that the Socias like the Beatles, the Socias and the narrators group are different, and so rank must mean not good, right? We thought the Beatles were bad. We didn't like them. Now when I go to the answers, I can take each answer and compare it to the idea that we thought the Beatles were bad. And I see right away unlikable. Another thing I can do with my pencil is to evaluate what each answer is in comparison to what we found. This answer we would say is a yes. It's a pretty good match for bad, and we can put a check next to answers that seem to be a good fit. We go to B, pungent. Well, we kind of have two options here. But let's just say for the moment that you didn't know what pungent meant. Then for answers we're not sure about, we can put a little squiggle to show that we aren't sure what the answer means. Luxuriant, well, we know that luxuriant doesn't match bad. For answers we know that don't match, we can cross them out. And ordered maybe is a regular definition for rank, but it totally doesn't mean bad. And so we can cross it out as well. What would I choose? The answer that I think is a yes, or the one that I squiggled and I'm unsure about? The answer that I think is a yes. And here's the cool part. It's the word pungent, even if we did know it, means that something smells bad, which is what rank can also mean in a different context. But we were able to figure out that's not how it's being used here. The biggest takeaways are as follows. Use your pencil and bracket off the actual lines that you need to read. We'll do this pattern a few times. Underline whatever you need in the context, or cross off the words that might be distracting to you. Write down a word that you might put in for the vocabulary, and always have a mark next to each answer to show what you think of that answer compared to what the text said. That looks like a lot of writing, but it's helping us stay organized, and it's constantly moving me through the steps of the problem so that on the reading, you want your pencil to always be moving. It's going to help you be most accurate. From the same passage, question 5, Tubit's reference to interesting conversation is most likely meant to be. In my mind, I say that they kind of want me to describe the comment. What type of comment is Tubit actually making? Line 32 is about here. Remember though, I kind of want to get a good sense of the context, and for these questions, it's very likely that I'm going to read most of the surrounding evidence. So for question 5, I want to focus on the comment, but I want to know what's going on. So I've quite a rep for being quiet, almost as quiet as Johnny. Tubit always said he wondered why Johnny and I were such good buddies. You must make such interesting conversation, he'd say, cocking one eyebrow. You keeping your mouth shut and Johnny not saying anything. But Johnny and I understood each other without saying anything. Nobody but soda could really get me talking till I met Sherry Valance. Well, now I have a much better idea of what he means by such interesting conversation. Because while he says the conversation's interesting, he's saying the two characters don't talk to each other. And so what I might do is I might say, wait a second, if it's interesting and they don't talk to each other, I might write down that Tubit is trying to be sarcastic, or he's making some type of a joke, showing that these two people who don't talk to each other wouldn't actually make for interesting conversation. If I go to my answers, complimentary definitely doesn't work here because he's not paying them any type of compliment, and I would cross that out. Ironic is possible because we know that Tubit doesn't really mean that their conversation's interesting. Maybe I'm not sure if that's exactly the right word, and I call it a maybe. Insulting would be taking the idea of sarcasm too far. If I look up, he's not necessarily insulting them, right? We might kind of infer that from outside the passage, but all he's saying is the conversation wouldn't actually be interesting. On the SAT, you would need to find evidence with your pencil that he actually thinks this is a negative or a bad thing. And so that's gone. And confusing? Well, if I look that he's trying to be sarcastic, Tubit is not trying to be confusing. He's trying to be sarcastic. He's trying to point out that what he's saying isn't really what he means. And therefore, what am I left with? That one answer. Maybe that's not how I phrased it, but it's the only one left that's not crossed out that seems to be matching with what I wrote down as the answer to the question. Notice, if we flip back just a moment, how similar the two problems look. So using your pencil isn't just about making progress, it's about developing consistency. And that's the number one path to being accurate. Same passage, and now, even if we're being asked what the author means, watch how these same weapons of our pencils still help. What does the narrator most likely mean by his statement in lines 64 to 65? Well, let's find out. 64 to 65 is here. that's not really enough to get what's going on. So let's go down. If I read at least a good chunk of that paragraph, right? Sorry, there we go. For question 8, again, looking to read a lot of the context, it says the horse loves soda, right? He'd stand there and chew on Soda's sleeve or collar. Gosh, but Soda Pop was crazy about that horse. He went down to see him every day. Mickey Mouse was a mean horse. He kicked other horses and was always getting into trouble. I've got me an ordinary pony, Soda would tell him, rubbing his neck. How come you're so mean, Mickey Mouse? Mickey Mouse would just chew on his sleeve and sometimes nip him, but not hard. He may have belonged to another guy, but he was Soda's horse. The question wants us to focus on the comment at the end. But we know from our evidence that what do we mean when he was Soda's horse? Well, apparently the horse seems to like the character Soda. And right back, Soda seems to like the horse. Your answers here don't need to be very articulate. They just need to be backed up by the evidence you underline with your pencil. So choice A, Soda Pop loved Mickey Mouse, the horse, so much he was willing to steal him. Nothing that I said says that he's actually going to steal the horse. And so we get to another reason you might want to use your pencil. Some SAT answers look awesome, but then they kind of betray you right at the end. Look for words or phrases that aren't backed up by the evidence that you underlined. Soda Pop was working hard at the barn to earn enough money to buy Mickey Mouse. There's nothing about him buying the horse in what we just read. Soda Pop and Mickey Mouse loved each other as if Soda Pop earned Mickey Mouse. I'll give a yes to this one, only because it captures their relationship. Soda Pop was the only one who could ride Mickey Mouse safely. I don't know that nobody else could ride the horse based on what I found. The best answer then becomes C. And this time around, we add in this idea of when you're going through those answers, 3 of them are flaws, 3 of them are traps, 3 of them don't fit what's going on. Most of the time, your pencil can find a word or phrase that is saying that answer is garbage and should be discarded as such. Cool. Towards the end of this paragraph, we have question 9. In the final paragraph, the narrator draws a distinction between. Again, this part we don't always need to write down, but it's good to know that we're looking to identify some type of distinction. Once again, I'm going to take the final paragraph, I'm going to mark it as question 9, and I'm going to read it. And I'm really looking for where there's a contrast. So there's this part that the horse has been sold and Soda's bawling all night long. Soda never wanted anything except the horse. Soda had been 12 going on 13. He never let on to money to mom and dad how he felt because we never had enough money and it was a hard time making ends meet. Still haven't found the distinction. But when you're 13 in our neighborhood, you know the score. I kept saving my money for a year thinking that someday I could buy Mickey Mouse back for Soda. You're not so smart at 10. So here's what I have. I have when Soda is 12 going on 13, he doesn't let on to mom and dad how he felt because he knows that we never had enough money and we had a hard time making ends meet. When you're 13, you know the score. But the narrator says, I kept saving my money for a year, hoping that I could buy Mickey Mouse back for Soda. You're not so smart at 10. And so what I have highlighted here is my distinction. Maybe this concept that you're not so smart at 10 because you think you could save up money and buy a horse back, but you know the score at 13. You know that a family that's struggling is likely not going to go and drop a few $1,000s on a horse, at least not the families I know. And with that being said, we can take this and go into the choices. The narrator draws a distinction between upper and lower class. No, it looks like our distinction here is between ages and what you know at those ages, not classes. So we can say there's our problem. Honesty and deception, but it doesn't look like we're talking about lying and telling the truth. Thriftiness and wastefulness, it's true that the passage does talk about money, but no one is described as being wasteful. All he's trying to do is save. Experience and innocence, sure, because it looks like Soda at 13 rather has the experience, whereas the narrator pony at 10 did not. And so that's our best match, and the answer would be D. So as we go through these, we see a lot of similarities into where our pencil helps us speed through the problem. Here, we have another problem like one we did earlier. And so what I encourage you to do is to walk along with me on this problem and see if you can keep up, trying to see where your pencil would be helpful. As is used in line 80, score most nearly means, well, we know to interpret this as what? Essentially, what does score mean? We also know at this point to jump into the passage and find the sentence where score is, which is there at lines 79 to 80. We know that as we're reading, we kind of want to cross off the word score. When you're 13 in our neighborhood, you know the blank. Now, if we feel like that's not enough, we could read before and after it, and we would understand that Soda understood the family's financial situation. So maybe we say that you kind of know the deal, right? Or maybe you know how it is. And so we can move through these pretty quickly now. A, amount. Yeah, a good match for the word score, but not a good match for what we wrote down. B, accomplishment, same thing. C, reality, that would capture, and the text definitely says that Soda knows the family's financial situation. And then D, expense, no. Yes, it's about money, but that's not matching with what we have down here. And so the answer would definitely be reality. Now, even though we focus so much tonight on the reading questions, we want to make sure that we understand that even in writing and language, things are still very helpful with our pencil. If we take a look at a quick look at number 8, which choice most effectively combines the underlined sentences? By underlining my question task, I want the most effective combination. But I also know that what I'm really looking for here is the most concise possible answer. And that because that's one of the things that SAT looks for. The original, Ebola must be spread through bodily fluids, so general awareness of preventative measures helps contain the disease's spread. Because of the way in which Ebola is spread, it is unlikely that an average individual would become infected. So I know the idea here. I want to capture that Ebola is spread through bodily fluids, that being aware of the measures helps contain the spread, and that it's unlikely that someone who knows that would become infected. So I look for the shortest answer, and that one would be B, and see if it combines the sentences and gets the message right. A general awareness of the ways to prevent the spread of Ebola, which happens through bodily fluids, makes it unlikely that the average person would become infected. I see that awareness of these preventative measures, the spread of bodily fluids, and it's unlikely that the person is still there. But now the sentences have been combined, and they've been done so rather concisely. So I really want to pick B as my answer, and the only question is, do A, C, and D do the job better? No, they all contain the same information, but it's phrased more awkwardly and it takes longer to get the point out. All of these fail the central task that I underlined in the beginning, and my answer is B. And finally, when you are confronted with a graph, it's more important than ever that your pencil takes notes and makes marks on our graph. Question 1, which choice most accurately and effectively represents the information in the graph? Well, I see my graph and I want to note that there's a key and a legend, there's axes, and there's a title. Let me make sure that each answer, I'm actually looking up that data on my picture. So what most accurately and effectively represents the information? 1, high school graduates will earn almost as much as weekly as those who don't graduate. If I look at my picture, the earnings are my bars. And high school graduates make here maybe somewhere roughly around like $750, $800. And then here for people who don't graduate high school, which will be about $400. That's actually looking okay when I use my pencil. I'm going to leave it alone. B, those who do not complete school are far more likely to be employed than those who earn a master's degree. Those who don't complete school, their unemployment's all the way up here. Notice I'm using the line. Master's degree, That unemployment is extremely low. No, this is the opposite of the passage. They are not far more likely to be employed. C, earning a doctoral secures the greatest financial benefit. But if I find doctoral, they are not the highest amount of money. That would be a professional degree. That's out. And D, there's no difference in income between unemployment levels between those who stop after high school and those who earned an associate degree. For high school, the difference between your earnings and your unemployment level is about this much. For associate's degree, it is way smaller. If I compare these two gaps, no way. There's definitely a difference. And so what's my best answer? Well, it's choice A. And only, look at how much I've marked up the passage. Only by going and checking each thing in the passage do I have the best odds of catching this. And so where does this leave us? You have a booklet, and the booklet has a fair amount of blank space. As you saw tonight, the more actively your pencil is moving, the more you are keeping track of what you're doing, being more accurate because you can see the steps on paper and getting a true sense of progress through the SAT problems. And so, whenever you're working your way through this exam, remember that while your eyes should certainly be reading, your pencil should be just as active to knock out the SAT once and for all. Hey guys, thank you so much as always for joining us on YouTube for Princeton Review's SAT Night Live. My name is SAT, oh no it's not, I wish man. My name is Ken Brenner, and please stay with us each Wednesday at 7 p.m. Eastern for more SAT trips. Have a great evening.